Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Massimo Santoli. I am the group's trust and estates attorney. What I'd like to do this morning is basically touch on a little bit of my background and how I became to be a trust and estates attorney. I also wanted to speak briefly about the need to do estate planning, the reasons why you want to engage in estate planning. And lastly, I wanted to touch upon a concept I came across called the family love letter, which I think all of us should be able to incorporate into our own lives, whether it's for our own children's benefit or for our own benefit. So having said that, I wasn't always a trust and estates attorney. I actually started out as an accountant. I got my Bachelor of Science degree in accounting over at St. John's University. And I worked several years for Price Waterhouse to get my CPA. At some point, I decided that a perfect complement to being a CPA would be to become a quote unquote tax attorney. And I'm going to get back to that point later on as to what I thought a tax attorney was. But the reason why I went into accounting initially was that my family's accountant used to always come over to the house. I remember being like a little youngster. I'm like, wow, isn't this a great field? You can go to the house, you can share a cup of coffee. Maybe that's just an Italian thing, but you can be a part of basically the family and take part in review of the finances and estate planning and so forth and so on. So I thought that was a nice idea. In any event, after working a couple of years at Price Waterhouse, I decided I would go back to law school and focus in the area of trust and estates. So I attended Hofstra Law School and I got my JD. And ultimately, I became admitted to practice law in the state of New York, New Jersey. And then 10 years later, I decided to take the bar again for some crazy reason. And I'm also admitted to practice in Florida as well. New Jersey, though, I should say that I'm inactive in New Jersey. In any event, for whatever reason, I don't know if I learned my lesson the first time or not, I wound up going back into public accounting again. And this time I did a couple of stints in the tax compliance area, which is basically doing tax returns over at Deloitte. And shortly thereafter, I started doing tax consulting at Coopers & Lybrand. So I had a little flavor of a couple of different things. Coopers & Lybrand ultimately merged with Price Waterhouse and became what's called today PricewaterhouseCoopers, or PwC. One of the benefits of me working there was that I was able to take night classes over at NYU. So I also received my master's in law in taxation as well while working full time. So that was a good benefit. But given the uncertainties of the merger, and given that I had just started out with my family and I had some little ones at home, I decided that I would go out to Long Island and join a very small law firm out on Long Island, focusing really on trust and estates. And after about 4 years of doing that, I ultimately decided to venture out into private practice. And since about 2004, I've been primarily working on my own as a sole proprietor. But I also act as of counsel to this firm called Stelzer Sussman Heitner, where my office is located and where I am today at Jericho, New York. And I've been doing that ever since. So my focus basically is in the area of estate planning, which everybody automatically thinks of: a will, a healthcare proxy, a power of attorney, and a living will. And they also think of planning for incapacity. So I also deal with guardianships as well. I also do a lot of work in the area of estate administration. So if there's a death in the family, I can assist whoever's appointed as the fiduciary with collecting assets and distributing those assets in accordance with a will, things of that nature, filing estate tax returns. A lot of the shift lately has been in the way of estate litigation. And estate litigation takes a lot of different forms, as we know. There could be contested probate proceedings, contested accounting proceedings, proceedings against the fiduciary for breach of his duties in that capacity. There's also turnover and discovery proceedings of assets as well. There's a lot of different things happening, but the focus lately has been in the area of estate litigation. But what I wanted to touch on today is more on the estate planning side, and then I want to talk about this concept of the family love letter. So estate planning, I mean, we all know about it, but what is an estate really, and why do we need to do estate planning? So an estate basically is you have an interest in all of your assets, both personal property and real property, okay? Now, there is a distinction between your gross estate, which is basically what I just said, versus your probate estate and what is disposed of by your will. Now, your probate estate is basically assets that are in your own name alone, or assets held as tenants in common. And those are the assets that are going to be disposed of pursuant to your will. Anything that is held as a joint account or has a beneficiary designation, those will pass by operation of law outside of the will and will just go to the person who is either the joint account holder or the beneficiary on the account. That's an important distinction. Estate planning, you want to engage in estate planning basically to protect your assets, to protect yourself, to make sure that in the event of an incapacity or of a death, that you've decided how your assets are going to be disposed of and what's going to happen during the period of incapacity. Okay. Why would you want to engage in estate planning? Well, for one reason is you want to know what your own needs are. You want to probably sit down with a reputable financial advisor and discuss what your cash flow needs are. And estate planning will help you figure that out. You'll also be able to touch on retirement planning. What do you need to be comfortable when you retire? You also want to address planning for incapacity, like we said earlier. So if there is an event where you're now incapacitated, who's going to make medical decisions for you? Who's going to make your financial decisions for you now that you can't do that yourself? So that's important as well. Other reasons to do estate planning, of course, you want to preserve your wealth. You want to protect what you work so hard to accumulate over the years and pass that on to your subsequent generations, to your loved ones. Another reason why you want to do estate planning is to minimize estate taxes. With President Trump in office, the estate taxes threshold have gone up significantly. For 2020, I think the federal exemption is now like $11.5 million and change. So anybody who is above that threshold has a federal estate tax issue or concern. And for New York State purposes, it's a little bit lower, but it's still at 5.8 million plus. So a lot of people tend to procrastinate when it comes to doing estate planning because of these thresholds being so high. But potentially there could be a change in the office of the presidency coming up in November, and those threshold levels may in fact change. So that's something to consider as well. You also want to do estate planning because you want to basically dispose of your property the way you wish. You don't want to have New York State dictate how your property is going to be distributed. So you want to engage in planning to make sure the assets are disposed of in accordance with your wishes. And you also want to be able to provide for future generations and make it easier for them. So if there's a family business, it would make it easier to pass that along to subsequent generations. So in any event, I wanted to go back to my earlier comment about how becoming a tax attorney, I thought it would be such a perfect complement. Initially, I figured to myself, well, I would engage in estate planning, and my clients would be so happy and so grateful for all the work that I did. I would save in taxes and so forth and so on. But like I just said, the thresholds are so high that people still tend to procrastinate. So there's been a noticeable shift from maybe the planning perspective to kind of like a wait and see approach, and then having all this litigation on the back end. So what I wanted to focus on today is, I normally say during my presentations and during my quote unquote elevator pitch that you should plan your estate before it's too late. And all of us know that we need to set aside time in the back of our minds to set up an appropriate plan for ourselves and for our families. But I wanted to focus a little bit, and what I wanted to touch on now is this concept of a family love letter. What can we do to ease the burden for our loved ones? I can't tell you how many times I have people come in and they're visibly in the process of grieving, and now they say, I don't know where my parents' assets are. I can't find anything. I don't know where anything is. I think there's a safe deposit box. I don't know where anything is. So it makes it very, very difficult for the loved ones to find out all this information. And the family love letter is basically a packet of information that can be provided and prepared now to assist your loved ones later on in the event of your incapacity or your death. I think one of the biggest mistakes all of us seem to make is that we think we have more time than we really do. And having said that, I wanted everyone to sort of ask themselves a couple of questions. And you could look at it from your parents' perspective. You could look at it from your own perspective. But do you know all of your parents' assets? Or on the flip side, do your children know all of your assets? I mean, if you're in the real estate business and have real estate investment properties, do your children know where all these assets are located? Do they have access to the deeds? Do you know where your bank or brokerage accounts are located? Does your family know what the account numbers are? How are they titled? Who's listed as the beneficiary? And you can go on with these questions. I mean, does your family know what your debts are, what your liabilities are, what your mortgages are, what your insurance coverages are? And that can include life insurance, auto insurance. All these things have to be taken care of in the event of incapacity or in the event of death. I mean, does your family even have contact information for all of the advisors? More importantly, does your family even know where your important documents are located? Where is the will located? The power of attorney, a prenup agreement, a buy-sell agreement, an operating agreement, your burial information for that matter. Like I said earlier, do they know where the safe deposit box is? Who has the key? Where is it located? And in today's world, where everything has become paperless and more digital, does your family members have passwords to your computer to access some of this information? Payments are being made online every single day now. Transactions are being done with the financial institutions also online. And does your family have access to that information? Can they get all that? Just picture if someone should die and everything has been done online, there's no paper trail now in terms of where are the bank statements. How can I find out these account numbers that we're talking about? So things of that nature. So to help address those questions, I think this concept of the family love letter is very important. And so basically, what is the family love letter? It's something that I came across years ago, and I can't take credit for it, but whoever established it deserves a lot of credit. Basically, it's an information booklet, and it's set out. The one that I have in my mind is basically set out in 5 different sections. The first 3 sections really capture your financial information. So it goes forth and puts down, or lists, I should say, and you would complete this as the person who would be providing this information to your children, let's say, your advisors and your assets, all your financial information, all the information concerning your insurance and benefits. Okay. So picture how detailed that could be. Bank accounts, brokerage accounts, insurance information, retirement accounts, military benefits, credit card information, frequent flyer miles is really an asset as well. Information about your prescriptions, your medications, your household expenses, income coming in, all that kind of stuff. So it's very, very important. Your will, your prenup, your passwords to your computers, all the very important documents. And you would list out exactly where it's located. Now, actually, I should probably show you really quick that the family love letter, it's like this particular one is like a 25-page booklet of information. And it's a wealth of knowledge for your loved ones. And I try to incorporate that into my practice, or at least tell the families that I'm meeting with that this is something that they should really look into doing, and putting together all this information about their advisors, their assets, where important documents are located, just to make it easier for everybody. Okay. And there's one last section which I found to be very interesting, and it's called the ethical will section. And that section is basically like, what do you want to leave as your legacy? What is it that you want to convey to your family members that you maybe learned and you want them to know? And you can kind of list out. It's almost like a true love letter, basically explaining your hardships, what you learned throughout the years, what you wanted your family to take from your life. And I think that's very important as well. Now, picture also a lot of situations in litigation, and I come across this a lot, where you don't know what the intent of your parent was, let's say. So there's always fighting saying, well, oh no, mom wanted me to have this account. Well, how do you prove that now if mom is dead? You can certainly ask other people and try to get testimony from others, but how critical would it be to have something set in mom's own hands saying, I really wanted my son so-and-so to have this account for X, Y, and Z reasons. And I think that would sort of reduce the potential for litigation if somebody really said, you know what, this is what really mom wanted. So I think that's important as well. So what is the family love letter? I'll ask it again. It's more than just an information booklet. To me, it's really like a gift, and it's the ability to reduce stress for loved ones during very, very difficult times. And I think it's important to have that source of information for the family members to minimize conflicts during that difficult and challenging times. So it's easy access to information. And it basically leaves a roadmap for the family members of all the quote unquote paper trail that you've created over the years. And sort of like it just keeps everything or puts your house in order, let's say. And just think how important that could be for your family members. And I guess in conclusion, I would just say, think about doing your estate planning, of course. You need the requisite documents, but more importantly, you need to have these conversations with your family members, whether it's with your parents or with your children. You have to have documents in place, and people need to know where to find these documents. People need to know where your assets are, and it could just save a lot of time and money. I know that us legal practitioners, a lot of people love conflict, and they like to make things go on because it generates a lot of funds. I'm not one of those particular persons. I would rather have peace amongst the family, and I typically try to find an avenue where people can come to some sort of resolution. But I think this family love letter concept is very important and will help reduce stress and the potential for litigation down the road. So it's something that we should all consider. So please consider it. The moral of the story is still plan your estate before it's too late. I know we all think we have a lot of time on our hands. We really don't. You never know what's going to happen. No one ever expected the COVID-19 pandemic to hit. It's time for everyone to kind of take a step back and really consider what's happening in their lives, getting your house in order. So thank you very much.